All right, I'm back. Let's see if this is any better or worse. I just need it enough to where you guys can at least hear me. And as I said, this isn't too big a deal. I can always record and kind of go back and look at the questions and follow up, make a nice little overview video. So let's see, is this any better or worse for the stream? I'm already seeing, all right, 1080p. Let's see if the audio is any better. Can you guys hear me? Make sure my audio is coming in. Good so far. It may not be amazing for this. YouTube is interesting. And what's funny is I don't think I've ever live streamed on this channel, so it may not be as good. YouTube is a little crazy about that sometimes. All right, good. So you guys can hear me. We're looking good so far. Sounds good. After this stream, I'll go and I'll find the preferred settings so that it hopefully will be okay. Awesome. So far, audio is better. Cool. All right, well, I apologize for that. I didn't think it would take the stream down, so this is actually technically a second stream. Let's address the first two questions. Okay, so first two questions I saw was one was about the Wisconsin audit, and the other was about the 2020 and 2016 elections. Let's talk a little bit about the elections first, and then we'll actually, no, let's talk about the audit. So give me a moment. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up the Wisconsin audit. We can search it together. I like doing this. This is a interesting webpage I have, so it's not really got anything on it. It's a blank slate. So we're going to pull up the Wisconsin audit 2025. I think AP News had recently posted this, and everyone was talking about it. So I would love to talk about this. I think this is it here. All right. Let me know if you can't hear or see anything. This should show up for you. All right. So what happened was Wisconsin finished and completed a audit. I believe it was 10% of all of the votes cast. So everyone's saying, hey, they completed an audit, 0 errors in 2024 election. Everyone thought that was interesting. Now, we actually looked at this audit. This kind of came up. Everyone was sending this to me, and they said, hey, so they saw 0 issues with this audit. Does this counter any of your concerns about the election, about potentially manipulating the tabulation machines and all of your data, all of the work the Election Truth Alliance has done? And I said, well, I find it first interesting that you found 0 errors when conducting an audit, because statistically or traditionally speaking, there should be some errors. That's how our systems work. We have almost a tolerance for errors. So to find 0 is interesting. And I said, let's do this. Let's look at what they did. So we actually had someone on the team reach out to their, I believe it was their state office, and asked about this, asked for the report. And let me pull up the report for you, and we'll quickly look through it. And I think you'll find some interesting things. So give me one moment. Let's pull up this report. It might take me a second to get it up here and then share it. But I did read the report. I found it very interesting, so I would love to share it with you. You currently can't get it. It's not online, I believe. Here it is. Perfect. All right, let me move out of the way. There we are. Is this good? Let me know if you can see this. This is what I love about I'm using Edge for this, and I love I can open PDFs in Edge because I can just keep doing this all day. Just loading PowerPoints and loading different things in the Edge. So let me know if we're good. Can we see this? All right. I'll make this about 5 minutes or less for this portion. But this is very important. I recently posted a video. Give me some thumbs up or give me some yeses if you guys can see this report on the webpage. Okay, we can see it. Okay, so what this is the Wisconsin Elections Commission meeting notice. This actually, we got this on the 5th, I believe, but this was to be published on the 7th. And all it is it just goes over what they talked about in the meetings. And in this meeting, they had the report about their audit they conducted. So if we search audit, you'll notice about page 50 is when they actually go into the audit that they conducted. Nice. So I think I can make it a little bigger, but it's not like you're really going to be able to read a lot. Ultimately, what this says is already I was like, okay, let's look at what they did for their audit and let's see what they would have found. So this is a post-election voting equipment audit. Already, they tell us what they did. This is a election voting equipment audit. And then I kind of read into what did they do, how did they conduct it, and what did they find. So they just talked about the standards for how they were going to conduct this audit. I believe they did a hand count of 10% of the votes across multiple places, and they compared it to the machine count. And so they reported the errors and the totals. And so I was like, okay, if they did just a machine audit, would it have been sufficient to catch potential manipulation of the tabulators? Well, as it loads here, we found, I think this is the right, it may not load well for me, but they actually, here it is. So they actually go into reporting the audited amounts. And so what we're seeing, they tell us what counties they audited and what equipment they audited and the ballots audited. At no point did they actually say, nor could I find them comparing the audited ballots to the election day totals. And so our concern is they just audited the equipment during the audit. So they did a hand recount of ballots. They did a machine count. They compared the two. But they didn't compare those counts to the election day results for these counties. And so if you didn't do that, you could potentially not catch tabulation manipulation. That's a fancy word. And the reason why is if our tabulators are being manipulated, like the data that we've been working on suggests, one, in order to pull this off, you would need to know how to utilize those machines. You would, need to be able to actually get malicious software or whatever it is onto those tabulators. And so it blows my mind that if you were able to do all of those things, why would you not do a timed window for executing the code or whatever it is that you're running? And that is the consensus for all the cybersecurity people who've really looked at how these audits are conducted, is they're saying this audit is not sufficient to catch a manipulation of the tabulators because the tabulators may function correctly during the audit. They may function before and after the election, but that is not a guarantee that they are going to function during the election correctly, because you could do a timed execution of some malicious code and you could change votes then, and you wouldn't catch it unless you compare the votes cast, the votes audited, to the reported totals on election day or early voting. And so this would not have been sufficient if all they did was check the machines. They wouldn't have caught this. It wouldn't catch manipulation. And so we do a lot of audits like this in the US. A lot of states do these audits, and it's the fallacy of, oh, we're good now, we must have been good then. An example of this occurring naturally, these counties are everywhere. I mean, it's almost all the counties in the state, I believe. 10% of all votes cast. So someone actually gave me, I spoke to John Brakey today, and I mentioned, this audit to him. And you know what he said? He said, that reminds me of the Volkswagen incident where they were misreporting pollution standards, where I believe they would go in and they would look at the amount of pollution the Volkswagens would generate when running. And when they would plug into the machine, into the computer on the vehicle, it would be like, oh, I'm being audited, I'm being tested, so I'm going to actually change my my running standards so that I meet the pollution thresholds. And they got caught for it because they couldn't see it. So I found that hilarious that this isn't like, we've seen instances of people cheating before, because if they know they're going to be tested, if they know they're going to be checked, you could plan around that. So Volkswagen got caught for doing something similar where they're like, oh, we're being checked, let's run normally. Let's meet the standards. But then when they're not being tested, do we truly know what's going on? Okay, I hope I answered those questions there. Exactly. Look, people are already talking about it. It is a pollution test. So Volkswagen already did it. So could you have done it for the tabulators? 100% you could do it for the tabulators. It's just a computer. You can do a lot with computers, as Elon Musk loves to say. He loves those computers. Now, hopefully that was sufficient. I would love to see, or I'd love to have, a follow-up on this if they're like, oh, we did do this. We did actually look at the election day results and did the comparison. Where's the report? Where's the counts? I want to see it, right? I want to see how many votes did both parties get per whatever races you audited, and let me see it. You're not showing it to us. You just said, hey, we counted this amount of votes. We're good to go. So, okay. Let's see. All right, that's that. Any other good questions? I think we wanted to follow up on the 2020 stuff. I will do that with a little PowerPoint here in a minute. Let's look at some other questions or other big concerns real quick. So people are talking about decertifying the election. I think, as we said before, constitutionally and legally, there's not really a avenue to do that. So instead, what we're going to focus on is we're going to make sure that the election was transparent and correct this time around. We're going to go and attempt to audit the places where we've done analysis. We have data for places that we haven't published yet. And so as we progress forward to actually filing these lawsuits and attempting to get these audits, which is what you guys have been donating for, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, what we're doing is we can't challenge the results of the election directly. We can't do a recount. We can't decertify the election. It's already been certified. It's already been done, and people are already in office holding power because of the election. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to audit it. We're going to make sure it was correct. If it wasn't, we're going to show that. And that's kind of the point, is you need answers and you need transparency first. We can worry about everything else once we know for sure. And so that's the point of doing an audit, is if the machines are compromised, if our tabulation machines are compromised, the future elections are compromised, the midterms are compromised, the next presidential is compromised, and this election would have been compromised as well. And so I see everyone making game plans, politically and not. They're talking about, hey, we'll get them next time. We weren't good enough, right? Or we didn't appeal to the people the right way. And I find that hilarious, because when it comes to making an appropriate plan, if you plan based off of incorrect data, then you're not going to come to the correct planning and conclusion. So I just want to highlight that everyone's like, oh, well, this happened, that didn't happen. Are we sure? And are we doing our jobs and making sure that our elections are run correctly the first time around? Look at what Germany did. Germany does, in their recent election, they did hand counts. The thing is, we don't need to do full hand recounts in our election. We just need to do hand recounts and audits the appropriate way. This voting machine and these risk limiting audits where you just look at the machines and you test them then isn't good enough. All you need to do, you could do a 10% audit after the election before certification and just do 10%. Go or do 100% of random places. Go to the highest, most dense populated areas. Do a statistical analysis there. Pull out early voting, election day, and mail-in. Do an analysis. Look at the paper. Look at the votes. Do a paper ballot analysis, because that's the only way you're going to catch manipulation. If the machines are changing votes, look at the paper. It's not that hard. And so it looks like we're the ones pushing for it, since our federal government hasn't, took us up on it yet. State governments haven't taken us up on it yet. So we're going to try and do it ourselves. And it's a domino effect in that sense. If we go somewhere and we find it there, where else could it have happened? And that's also where our analysis points out on our website here. As this is populated, we have Nevada, we have a little bit about Pennsylvania. We're looking at the other swing states. We have data on these other swing states. We haven't published them yet because we're double checking, and non-swing states as well. And the point being, if it happened in Nevada, if it happened in Pennsylvania, well, that's 2 of the swing states. How many other swing states did it happen in? How many swing states does it have to happen in to change the results of an election? You'd be surprised how little it takes to change the results of an election. And then on top of that, we do have some follow-up on Clark County that we can talk about today. Looks like we are getting 20, 30 minutes in here. So if you've not seen any of these analysis, go to our website. It's on our website under analysis. And then we also have our media pages where we post our press releases and everything else here you can kind of read up on. If you want to donate to help us pay for these audits, we have multiple options here. We also have a GoFundMe that's still up. I can put that in the description. And if you want to volunteer, I apologize. All of you who have volunteered, thank you so much. We can't process you all. We've in the last week, we've brought in, I think, 10 to 15 different people, data analysis, HR, data science related, server and database developers, and we're still reaching out to people. So if you did volunteer and you're like, hey, I have skill sets and I want to help, we're trying to get to you. And there's not a good system for us to just jump in. So we're rating it based on what do we need right now to keep going, and then we will catch up. So thank you guys so much for volunteering. We've had a lot of really good people come in the last few days alone, and it's been amazing because it's no longer, it's not me. That's the point, is I'm just kind of here. I'm just the spokesperson. I just talk about things. I do, some of the data analysis stuff, yes, but I am not the ETA. I'm not all of the ETA. We have, what are we at now? Like 25 plus volunteers that are doing the work, doing the posts, doing everything, jumping back into the data and getting us our Pennsylvania analysis published. And so it's not just me in a trench coat, saying, "Oh, I'm the ETA." It's not. I'm here because I can be, because I was willing to take the risk of putting my face on this, willing to put that target on my back and stand up for this, and protect the people who can't, the people who have to be anonymous because their jobs are at risk if it gets out that they're working with us. Like I lost my job because I'm doing this. So it frustrates me when people are like, this is a scam or this is a grift. If this was a scam or this was a grift, why would I have done so much? Why would so many people have done so much when it would have been easier for me just to keep working my normal job? Like the amount of effort, time, and energy I've invested in this, and the people who work with me, Lily and Jive, have invested in this, just for this to be a grift or a scam, it's not worth it. I'm not making money off of this. All the donations you guys are giving us, unless you donate directly to me, in which we want to keep that separate. All of the donations that we're getting go to the ETA to pay for these lawyers, these lawsuits, to pay for our equipment and our servers and our services. So it's not like I'm making money off of this, and it would have been easier just to keep working in cybersecurity and honestly just relaxing. So I do get a little upset. I get a little heated because it's not about me. It's about defending the people who've been working so hard, and they're the ones that are getting discredited. So we are working. We are trying. This is a real thing, and we are going to do everything in our power for the promises we've made to look at this, to investigate, to get these audits, to fight this fight, because no one else is doing it. And it's so frustrating to see that. So besides that, I was going to try and pull up the PA portion. Let's see, reports, presentations. We have one of two. Let's pull it up on Substack. I'll show you that. So we're doing a 3-part. Well, I spelled that absolutely horrible. Sorry, we got animals in the background screeching. All right, we're going to pull up the Substack real quick. Okay, if you guys aren't familiar, go check out Smart Elections. I was trying to get to ours, but Smart Elections is here, and they are amazing. They have been doing this. Honestly, they helped us get to this point. They were super supportive. They were willing to talk to us about all of our concerns, and they gave us a lot of advice. So if this is their Substack. If you've not seen them, go check them out. They've done a lot with drop-off analysis. That really opened the door for us to look a little deeper. We did a live stream with them, actually. We talked about some of our concerns, some of our findings in D.C., during the Women's March, or the People's March event. So that was huge. Now I got to figure out where our Substack is at. So I am always one to, I like to say, is our Substack, did they take down our Substack? No way they took down our Substack. Hey, if ETA guys, if any of you in here, can you DM me the Substack? Here it is. Here it is. This is new. So we're up to 1,000 plus subscribers. And here is your 1 out of 3 Pennsylvania analysis. So this one, this is kind of the lead up. It just talks about the concerns, the way the results and the voting kind of came out. It does highlight me talking about if the vote tabulators are compromised, which they had a good amount of election day issues with the tabulators. Here's the thing about Pennsylvania. Here's the reason why it's concerning. If you're not familiar with the vote counting computers comment made by President Trump the day before inauguration during his pre-inauguration rally, he talks about Elon Musk and his familiarity with vote counting computers in Pennsylvania and them subsequently winning Pennsylvania in what looks like a landslide. So that was an interesting comment. We were already looking at Pennsylvania before this, and we were already concerned. Stephen Spoonamore originally was concerned as well, and he made the announcements of, hey, I would be concerned about tabulation machines being an opportunity to cheat. And so this is kind of us beginning that conversation on the vote tabulators could change the outcome of an election. Pennsylvania had issues with their tabulators. And so we talk about some concerns about the chain of custody and how you could have potentially gained access to voting information. They had a sweepstakes. Elon Musk ran a sweepstakes in Pennsylvania, and it was found technically not illegal because it wasn't a real sweepstakes and they'd already pre-selected winners. But nonetheless, he gathered information about voters with that. That's a huge concern. If you had the information of voters in a virtual poll book, if you will, and you had the ability to manipulate the tabulators, you could generate fake votes with that information. We're not saying he did that. We're saying you could do that. And so we want to make sure that it doesn't happen. And it wouldn't be caught unless you did an audit and actually looked at the votes, the physical votes cast. We rely too much on our digital reports. Those could be manipulated and changed. So this is one of three. We're going to have the second one and then the third one subsequently posted. Those are going to get a little more in-depth in what we're seeing. And you're going to see some actual data there, some graphs like you like to see, and some concerning graphs as well. So let's see. Any other things here? Good questions. Any questions? Let me look up. Let me read the chat since I'm not able to do it live. I see people still talking about the Wisconsin audit and the 0 errors. That is concerning. Maybe the machines are just really good post the election. But, you know, as I said, it's not representative of the actual election. You want to double check. I see someone had mentioned, hey, we should make a template for sending out, mailing your officials. And so it should be by state. We could try and generate some type of list and some type of template. So you guys could go and be like, hey, I'm in Pennsylvania, and it'll have that template of, hey, you know, blah, 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 Secretary of State, Governor, on that point. So when I ask people, hey, you know, if you want to help and you don't want to donate or you don't want to volunteer, which is perfectly fine, if you want to email, call, etc., your state officials, let's look at what that would be like. So what I would recommend doing, I don't believe we have a template online. That's something we can definitely do. Oh, call to action. Here we go. Beat me to it. Might not be in here. We might have a template or something. I think on other resources, we may have... Okay, if we don't, let's make a note. For those of you guys watching, let's make a note to see if we can get some type of verbiage where people can go and access a letter or an email or a phone calling script. I think someone's messaging me about that already. Oh, it's on the way. All right, the template is on the way. So that we'll get you a template, and then hopefully you guys will be able to help out. Here's what I think you should focus on. Your governors have ridiculous power. I want them aware of these concerns. I want them to be amenable to looking into this, or at least if we have to do it, if we get there first, if you will, that they won't be surprised. Your secretaries of state also have power over elections. Your attorney generals have a lot of legal power. So these are the people you really want to focus on at the high level. If you want to focus counties, like in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia is one of the counties we have concerns about. There's a registrar. There's a board of elections, I believe, for them. These are people you can call and reach out to. Calling is one of the best ways to do it, honestly. If you call them and just say, hey, this is who I am. I am one of your, I live local to this area. I'm concerned because I'm seeing some of the stuff that the Election Truth Alliance is talking about or Smart Elections is talking about. And I want to talk to you guys about my concerns. And honestly, we've had people do that when we've had people respond and tell us, hey, I talked to this person, or I talked to their representative, their someone who works on their team. When we had, I believe, one of the California representatives, I think it was Maxine Waters. I'll have to double check. I'm horrible in names. When she had made some statements, actually, let's look that up real quick. I think we made a post. Let's look at that. I'll show this as an example. I think it's Maxine Waters. Maxine Waters suggests we don't know the scope of Musk's influence over the election. So when she made this statement about concerns of the election, Elon Musk potentially, and with his high technology ass, as she said, what could he have done? So this is an excellent example of we should reach out to her and give her support and say, hey, thank you so much for talking about this. This was awesome. And tell her about, hey, here's our concerns, here's our fears. They need positive reinforcement just as much as they need negative reinforcement. So ultimate game plan here. We need to make sure elections are no longer taboo. Talking about elections shouldn't be taboo. It shouldn't be something that you're afraid of doing. because you get labeled as an election denier. That is not what this is about. This is election security. This is making sure our elections are safe and secure. There's only one way to do that, and that is to check. That is to audit. That is to do your damn job the first time around. And so Germany does their job the first time around. We saw that with their election. We saw that with their paper ballots. Canada will hopefully do their job. They do paper ballots for their voting system. If we're going to use computers to do our elections are the most important process of our democracy, of our country. Everything, all the stops should be pulled out for our elections. And so we can't trust machines only. We can use machines, but if we're going to use machines, we better audit the paper trail every time to a sufficient standard before the certification of the election. It's not that hard. So we fail when we do that. We had so many people, so many different communities of election officials, election integrity officials, cybersecurity guys. They're all talking about, hey, we have these concerns, and they addressed it before, during, and right after the election, and it never went anywhere. The FBI, the CIA, they never checked. So if our government's not going to do their jobs and check, I guess it's going to have to be independent organizations like the Election Truth Alliance. That's kind of why we made this, to do it, because we care. That's the whole point. We're just a bunch of random people with skill sets that happen to let us do this. So, all right. So awesome props for her. Hopefully we have more people speak out about this, because all it takes is audits. That's all we need. We're not saying let's go, swarm the Capitol like what happened 4 years ago. We're not saying any of that. We're saying let's double check. Let's do our job. Let's audit. Let's make sure, because if it was compromised, that is a big deal. So, all right. Excellent question about the how do we reach out and what do we do and what that's going to look like. We'll have an update then when we put up some template and guidance, and we'll go from there. And then, yeah, we've been contacting individuals for media, and the problem as well is it's hard for us to break through. So we want to talk to more people. I want to do more live streams. I want to go on podcasts and shows. So I am always open to do that. If anyone has those opportunities, just email board@electiontruthalliance.org and we'll get back to you. Let's see. All right. Other questions? Any big questions here? What will it take for an audit to go forward? Excellent question. So I don't think we have anything directly up here that I can find for audits. I'm sure we have something. I just have to find it. So what would an audit look like? For us specifically, if the states jump on it, the states could do their own audits. As I said, they need to do audits of the paper ballots, not the machines. We don't, it's unlikely to really find anything of the machines if you just check. So just do the paper. Just go and do a paper count or do a machine-assisted paper count. Compare it to the election day results. That is a sufficient audit. Look at your most populous areas where there were only a few machines and a lot of votes across them, thousands of votes per machine. You're likely to find if there was manipulation, it could have occurred there. For us, let's talk about lawsuits then. Let's talk about that a little bit. So we gave you some initial totals for what lawsuits and a audit of a certain standard would look like. For us, I wish I had something to show you in this regard, but what we're looking at, I don't think we have anything specifically for audits up yet. Actually, we do. So if we go to YouTube, excuse me, I'm dying here. I was a little sick the last few days. I'm almost better, so I apologize. It's the seasons. Everyone seems to get sick around the same time. So excuse me, I apologize. So if you go to electiontruthalliance.org, I don't know what all this weird YouTube stuff is. As I said, this is a clean webpage. All right, if we go to our YouTube channel, yeah, you see the Maxine Waters video uploaded 2 days ago, and I talk about Wisconsin, but we actually had this audit video. Oop. And so what this audit video is talking about is it's saying, hey, what are the standards for an audit? And I don't think I put numbers in here, but I'll give you some numbers. Would be great to... As I said, all of these people you guys are recommending, I would love to talk to them. And we can actually, I think we can go back in the chat and try and pull those names. Do I still game? No, I haven't played video games ever since I started this. I don't have the time. But I was a big gamer before this. I loved playing survival games. So yeah, I love that you asked that. Okay. Audit costs. So we estimated around 20 cents or so per ballot audited as a standard. Some places are higher, some places are lower. For some of the places we were looking at, it would cost manpower alone around 15,000, 11 to 15,000 for some of the counties we're looking at to do a audit of the paper trail. That's actually not the hard part. Doing the audit's not the hard part. That's just counting. That's just getting people. And we can get those prices down if we have volunteers, and we'll do that. So if we when we actually file the lawsuits and we gain access to do the audit, we can address bringing in volunteers and reducing the costs, because I've already had people say, hey, if you're going to do this, I will volunteer to come in and do this and do the counting. So thank you so much for that. So 11 to 15,000 for the actual audit part. I was estimating, and we were estimating around 10,000 or so for some of the lawsuits per lawsuit for legal. That was absolutely wrong. I will admit when I am wrong. I was wrong. The board and us, we did not know what it was going to cost because no one's really been transparent about this. You guys can guess. It was, let's see. Let's just say that $10,000, let's say, I think I did the numbers. And if I pull them up here, just today, so we do have a lawyer team. We do have a lawsuit and a lawyer team already in the works. We haven't filed the lawsuit yet. The reason we haven't filed the lawsuit yet is we have a few things we need to do first. It comes down to gathering the data and summarizing it and presenting it and getting it all ready, doing getting other bits of information. So we're looking at, as of right now, not this week, likely not next week, but the following week is really when it looks like when I'm pushing to try and see, can we file? Can we go? Obviously, I would do it next week if I could, but it's likely to be closer to 2 weeks to 3 weeks from now before the filing would actually occur. That could shift. That could get closer. That could get further away. That's hard to guess. What I can say, it's not going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's for the first one, and we're looking at 3 different locations for this one. The first one's already in the works, as I said. We're trying to find lawyer teams for the second in a different place, in a different location. It's going to be around $25,000 for 2 to 3 weeks of that type of work for the lawyer team and the preparation. There's no real knowing how long it could take. So we're aiming for around 30,000. Really, it's around 30,000 as we originally estimated. 30,000 just for the lawyer stuff, and hopefully we can reduce the audit costs or not. But 30,000 to get us to that point where we're going and we filed and we're actually, beginning the lawsuit. 30,000, and so we've actually been. You guys have donated as of right now. You've donated over $20,000. I'll have to go back and look because I don't actually run the finances. I know, it's crazy. I don't run it. One of our other board members runs the finances. You donated over $20,000 in the last week, I believe. And that was the big push, is that was enough for us to seal the contract for the lawyers, to pay their initial fees, their retainer and everything, and then to begin to pay for the first week and 2 weeks of the process to actually file the lawsuit. Yep. All right, so we're looking at almost $30,000 in donations. This is huge. It's going to be a lot, though. But we can start and we can go, and then we can continue to address those needs as they come up. So if you're able to donate, if you're able to help us, we're going to be as transparent as possible about what it's costing us to do this. And as I like to say, what is the price of our democracy? It's more than I could ever give, and I'm happy to try and pay that price. So, and I've paid that price to get to this point. So hopefully we're able to keep going. I'm not going to stop until we get audits, no matter how we do it. And so that was the fun conversation. I'll tell you a little bit about our game plan and the legal aspect and the lawyers. So I originally went to the lawyer team not too long after the ETA was formed, not too long after we had some solid analysis in some of the places we're looking at. We've not released these analysis. We haven't published the places we've been working on in some of these regards because we don't want to put that target on that lawsuit before it's filed, or even because it's kind of an issue of the potential power that we're up against, we don't want them to know our game plan before our game plan is going and has started. And I hate that I can't tell you. I hate that I can't tell you where and when and why and all of that. But we only get one shot at this. We can't have roadblocks. We can't have mistakes. And that's why the first lawyer team that I had went to, I said, hey, this is what I want to do. These are our concerns. They said, given the laws of the places we're looking at, a recount won't work. That's where we adjusted our stance. It was too far after the election. It was insufficient. Harris had conceded, and if she would have actually demanded audits, it would have had legal standing. She conceded. So we said, okay, we can't do a recount under legal law. We can't challenge the results of the election. So let's do an audit. And that's what we've been actually seeing as a successful avenue forward is we have to meet the burden of evidence to do an audit. It requires a lot of work. We're using a statistical analysis, and we're using all kinds of demographic knowledge and everything else. We're finding any form of evidence that supports the concept of was there election fraud or not, right? And if there was there, that's why we highlight it. We're using that as legal standing on top of anything else we can find. And I want to address people who are like, hey, well, you guys are coming at this from what happened in 2020. And they're like, you're looking for excuses to say the election is not correct. That's not true at all. In fact, the first 4 weeks after the election, me, Jive, Lily, and others, our job wasn't to prove was the election rigged or not. We instead were saying, this is weird, what's going on? We were looking at the drop-off vote analysis, we were looking at the 7 swing states, and we said, what would have caused this, and is it normal? And then we found the concerns of tabulation issues. All of the data points to the same thing. It's not like we're picking examples and holding it up. We're looking at everything, and it all points to the same problems of, for some reason, it looks like the drop-off vote could be caused by a tabulation manipulation where they're changing and deleting votes, and that would cause the drop-off. So we looked into that deeper, and we found at the lowest levels, we're potentially seeing that change occur. And we could see it in early voting for Clark County, Nevada, for example, or we could see it in Election Day, potentially for Pennsylvania. And so we're not coming at this from the top down like what happened in 2020. 2020, I think I could probably find, I will make a video. I said I was going to make a video. I worked on a PowerPoint. But 2020 was the exact opposite. It was pushed from the top down. The election is rigged. Go and find me evidence. Instead, this is the opposite. We're saying the evidence is here. We have the evidence. You can see it. You can do the analysis. You can run the numbers. It all points to the same concerns. So we started from the evidence and worked our way out to a theory and tested the theory time and time again. They were hunting for excuses to show the election was fraudulent. They could not find sufficient evidence in those 2020 lawsuits, those 60-plus lawsuits. But were they truly looking for evidence of election fraud? Or were they looking for evidence of election fraud that benefited just them? So, all right, let's address any other questions here. I think we got about, I'll give you another 10, 15 minutes and talk about some other stuff. I don't know why she conceded. Everyone was asking about that. The amount of people recommending that she just do an audit just in case was a lot. I think we had some of the people who worked on our cyber team were telling, I think, I can't remember, is Jackie, I can't remember her last name, but Jackie was also saying, hey, this is something we want to look at. Let's do an audit, you know, or not an audit. Let's just ask your recount. Do a recount. The people will pay for it. Didn't happen. Okay. Let's see. Anything else? Any other big questions you guys have? I'll jump into a PowerPoint real quick, and then I think we'll wrap up for this one. I appreciate you guys so much. I would have been happy with 10 people asking me questions. That's kind of the kind of guy I am. But right now, I think we're at almost 200 people really jumping in here and asking questions, so I love it. And let's see. Anything else? Any other big questions? Any dying questions? Yeah, Jackie Singh. Jackie Singh was mentioning this. I've not actually been able to talk to Jackie Singh directly, but I think her concerns were valid. So someone asked, will the lawsuits be filed in multiple locations or one by one? They will be filed in separate states, separate locations, one by one, independent teams all working on their own lawsuits. Compartmentalization. That's why it does get expensive. To be fair, our first legal team is the most expensive and most, I would say, the best team we could have gotten to do this. So that's why they cost so much. That's why it's kind of getting our foot in the door. If we're going to succeed, they are knowledgeable enough to give us the best chance to do it. Like, this is their bread and butter. They deal with elections. That is their job. So that is why they are very expensive. Ridiculously expensive. I didn't know how much lawyers cost, to be honest, until, doing this. So have you compared with historic election data? Yes. Let's jump into the PowerPoint here. Can I talk about strategic plan wise? I think, as we said before, the strategic plan is simple. We're going to keep putting out data. We're going to keep spreading the word. We're going to keep demanding audits and recounts while we pursue the legal lawsuit to get audits. We're just going to do it anyways. We don't know. Maybe tomorrow a governor will say, let's do an audit, but we don't know. And so we're going to try and pursue these lawsuits to get the audits anyways. And hopefully other people jump on it and make our jobs easier. It's a domino effect. We show manipulation in one place, like our data suggests. It just grows from there. So thank you guys so much. All right, let's show you. All right, I'm going to pull up. Give me one moment. I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint because I know how much you guys love PowerPoint. So I had prepared this PowerPoint. This is our most recent PowerPoint. You may have seen this. But I think now is the time just to touch base on some of these things. A lot of people say that I don't do a good job really explaining it in a simple way. So I'm just going to take some quick time to show you. So I'm going to make a big screen here for you. Don't know if that was better or worse, actually. Stand by. What does this look like for you guys? It doesn't. Okay. One moment. Nope. And here we go. Reader view. All right, so this is our election manipulation in Clark County, Nevada, Clark County, and Washoe. So someone had asked us, did we do comparisons to previous elections? Yes, we did look at historic results. And so all we're going to jump into is we're just going to jump into the background. And hopefully this is simple. The reason why Washoe County and Clark County came up on our radar is they have very good data there. They published that data immediately, and they are the largest counties in the state for Nevada. Nevada is a swing state. So these are the Democratic strongholds where, like, if there was manipulation, these places, I'm curious what their data looks like. And so that's, we got their cast vote record. They published it publicly. It shows all three voting types, and it shows how people voted. And so this is a little bit of background, and I've had this I've had this conversation a lot. This is a great conversation. I've talked to Ray Lutz and other individuals in election auditing and statistical community when it comes to the elections and voting. And they're like, hey, we have concerns. You can't really say the bell curve or the binomial distribution is accurate when looking at voting data. They're not wrong, right? The problem is it's not really been applied like this before. And how do you, with a scientific method, how do you prove or disprove something scientifically, right? You create a theory and you test it. And so what we are doing is we're saying, based on our knowledge of how a binomial distribution works or how voting data would naturally occur, we believe that it should resemble something like a bell curve. The caveat is a binomial distribution is a very specific process. And so we do agree it could fall slightly outside of a traditional bell curve. No one knows. And that's kind of the point, is we're testing this every time we do an analysis. And we're finding that where there is no drop-off vote concerns, that data looks more like a bell curve. Where there is drop-off vote concerns and potential manipulation of the tabulators, the bell curve is not at all reflected. And we'll show you that. And so that's kind of what we're arguing here, is it may not be a pure and beautiful binomial distribution like what we're seeing here, but it in some capacity should show something like this. And that's because a binomial distribution, fancy statistical terms, what it means is, people like to say a coin flip. I don't like using the coin flip term. It's just the concept of, if you know computer coding and it's escaping me. Ones and zeros, right? Electronics. I've already forgotten. Someone tell me what it's called. Computer language. I know this. I've already forgotten. Ones and zeros, right? On and off. It's not binomial. Binary. Thank you. Binary code. 1 and 0. All that means is, did I get something or did I not? It's the same thing when we look at binomial distribution. Was there something there, yeah, binary, or was there not something there? And so all you're looking at when you do a binomial distribution is you're saying, did it occur? Did it not occur? And so we're applying this to voting. And we're just saying, hey, every time someone casts a vote, or every time a candidate gets a vote, everyone's binary now. Thanks, guys. Someone said assembly language. How dare you? No, I'm joking. No, I haven't coded in a while. My last coding language was, it's been years. It's been years. But anyways, final bottom line up front, all it means is, did someone vote for that candidate or did someone not? And so we're under the assumption, and we're testing the theory, that you can show this because when you look at one party and you look at one vote type, they either got a vote or they didn't get a vote. And each vote is cast independently from the vote before and the vote after. Caveat, I do understand, depending on where you vote, if you are a super one-way, a very one-party area, it's going to skew your votes because you're going to have a higher Republican or higher Democrat turnout in those areas. But it's assumed that if you have a large enough sample size and enough points of data, they're going to balance each other out and you're going to get that more normal distribution. And so that's what we're testing. That's what we're showing. And I'll be honest, I have yet to see things that don't match this concept. But anyways, this is just showing mail-in ballots. There's not enough tabulators, not enough points of data to get a distribution. But here's what you should look at. Notice how independent of the amount of votes cast, it's a straight line. And so this is very interesting for us. What you'll see for mail-in is the Democrats almost always are exceeding. The Republicans are not. Presidential, Senate, generally they're more popular in mail-in. And so here's Election Day. If you've not seen this, this is Clark County, Nevada. Remember what we talked about, right? That bell curve, that more normal distribution. So we've overlaid it here. And here's the same concept. The way you read this graph, let me explain the graphs because I forget to explain the graphs for you guys. Yes or no, right? Did you get a vote? Did you not get a vote? And so this is Harris for presidential race. Did she get votes in these areas? And so the bottom graph is the amount or the percentage of the votes she got. It's pretty simple. So if we look at the top here, she got 55% of the votes. The frequency is the amount of tabulation machine or the vote counting machine. Sorry. Here's where it gets a little confusing. The frequency is the voting locations or the voting machines that reported the amount of votes. It's not the tabulators. It's the machines where people voted. The reason why we say the tabulators are potentially manipulated is all of those votes are taken back and given to added up in those tabulators and could be changed there. And that would change the outcome of these votes. Do I got to go left here? Am I slowly drifting? Is this better? Nope, I'm invert. My camera is mirrored, so I was scooting left. I was going right. Do you want me to? Oh, wait. Oh, my bad, guys. Why did you not say something earlier? Here we go. My bad. As we were saying, there you are, a more normal bell curve. I was scooting in my chair. A more normal bell curve. So, I don't know if you can see my mouse. You can. Okay, you can see my mouse. So as I said, if we say, let's look at 55% of the votes, and these are the vote counting machines on the y-axis. The frequency is how many polling locations and voting machines where those votes were cast at, not the tabulation machines. And so we look here, we see 55% of 250 voting locations Harris got. So she got 55% of the vote for Election Day in 250 voting locations. That's how this graph reads. I know it's a little confusing, but that's the way we're showing the data here. And so it's not the tabulators, it's the voting locations. And the concern is if you manipulated the tabulators, the votes are taken from the voting machines, added up in the tabulators, summed up in the tabulators, and you could have changed the data there, and it would change this reported amount of votes. Does that make sense? I do have a overlay of the vote frequency for Trump. It's just going to mirror. We only have really a two-party system, so it's just going to be the same shape. It's actually up at the top. It's overlaid. Red is Trump, blue is Harris, and you just see that it just mirrors on the other side of the 50%. He did get a little bit more votes, but you see that it's the same shape. Yeah, as I said, Election Day matches what you would expect to see, a normal, almost binomial distribution. There is a weird dip here at the 50% area, which before we thought was just, a portion of the data. Maybe, maybe that's a thing. We are now under the impression that is actually not just random, and we'll jump into that a little more. So here's what you were asking about. Do we have both candidates? This is for early voting. So Election Day, right, we saw that more normal distribution. Early voting, we see a absolutely not normal distribution. Not at all. And so what we want to highlight here is if we can assume voting data should match a more normal distribution, why does this not? And this is where we get into the concept of a Russian tail and changing votes around. Any questions on this? How do you explain tabulators versus machines? We need a two-word slogan of rage. It's a great question. It's kind of hard. It's kind of complex. And it changes and it varies based on voting machines and locations. In Clark County, for example, they vote digitally with their machines, and then that is taken in a USB drive. Those vote totals are taken in a USB drive and then tabulated later on. That's why it gets a little confusing, is we're seeing manipulation of the voting data that was cast at the voting machines, but the manipulation is potentially occurring in the tabulators after the votes were counted up later on, summed up later on. Okay, so this is the same thing, the way you read this. Bottom here is Trump. So let's say 60% of the vote across the 150 tabulators, or 150 vote machines, not tabulators, 150 voting machines. And what's strange about this is we're seeing, instead of a more normal bell curve, it's almost a, it rises up, and then it dips down, and then it spikes. And it's the same for both parties, but one party is the mirror of the other. And so we're like, what would cause this? Well, remember how I said if we could expect votes to be a bell curve, this is early voting. This is early voting. And it looks weird. It looks like manipulation occurred here. Looks like votes could have been changed, moved around, or deleted. And so we said, let's look at the same tickets. Let's look at the same tickets for early voting, but for different races. So we talked about the presidential race being potentially manipulated because the data doesn't fall within what we would expect a more normal distribution to look like. We mapped the distribution for other races. Everyone following me here? Questions? Yeah, I said vote counting machines at some point. I think I addressed it. It's the voting machines that people vote at, and then the tabulators are where they take all the votes and they add them up. And so you would change the votes in the tabulator, and it would look like where people voted changed. That's what's going on. That's why it's a little confusing. All right, any questions on everything so far? I'll kind of stop. I'll read the questions here. As for today, yeah. Okay, looks like we're good for now. So I'll kind of rush through the last of it here. This is early voting, the same ticket that we just saw, right? This is the same ticket that people were voting for president, and they got this distribution. This is the same ticket, the same voters, the same people, the same locations. And this is for the state Supreme Court. And so we're seeing that more expected normal-like distribution here. And these graphs aren't, there's some wonkiness with the graphs that we'll want to address, but overall, you're seeing that more normal distribution as well. It's the same way you read it, is percentage of votes, the amount of voting machines that those vote percentages occurred on. Blue here is Harris, or technically speaking, this is different candidates. These candidates are the two different people running for the, I think the blue here is one of the state Supreme Court runners, and the other is actually none or other vote. But the point being is we see a distribution here, and I'll follow up and I'll make these fancier. I'll give you some names and some labels. These aren't specifically party-based in this sense. There are Democratic state Supreme Court candidates that run, but we're looking at the distribution and less about who it is. And so that's why it's Series 1, Series 2. And it's not just the state Supreme Court chairs, it's also the ballot questions. They have 7 ballot questions. As I said, remember we talked about it being a more normal-like distribution. Depending on some things, it may not be perfect. And we're testing what would cause different shapes and different concepts because it's not really been applied like this before. But we do see for question 1, I don't recall what the questions were. Some of them are different, like changes to the state laws or the state rules. But we do see a more normal-like distribution. Question 1 is a little more shifted. I'm curious to see what would cause certain shifts. Does it mean manipulation? Naturally, no. Nothing means manipulation, but it does highlight concerns. So we do see they are not a perfect bell curve, but they are a more normal-like bell curve, and they are definitely not missing pieces of a bell curve like we see in early voting. So this could be just a quirk of how people voted based on demographics. Like that would cause this. That would cause the shape just to be a little more heavy left or right-sided. That's okay. Question 2, more normal-like bell curve. So we also had another question. It's not represented here. It's actually an abortion question, and I'm going to do a follow-up video, and we're going to highlight how many votes people voted for yes or no to allowing abortion compared to the other races. And so all of this is just to show you early voting was cast. President and the Senate races look like this, but the other races look like this. That is a red flag. That is a huge concern. That's why we want audits. That's why we want to make sure that votes weren't changed around for the presidential and the Senate races in Clark County, Nevada, in Washoe County, and in other swing states as well. Now, this is just us talking about the actual statistical concept of a Russian tail. 2020 Russian constitutional referendum. Putin had more terms, and this allowed him to do it, and we see a similar shape as what we're seeing in early voting for Clark County, Nevada. If you've not seen this before, it's the same thing. It's the same concept of if you're manipulating votes, it's going to look like this. Statistically or potentially speaking, that's our theory. It would look like this. And so we see that not only for Russia's 2020 constitutional referendum, but the Georgia, the state, no, the country of Georgia's Dream Party results look more like potentially manipulated votes as well. Hello, Lauren. I see people are saying, hey now. Okay, any questions here? I didn't do the House yet, just the presidential and the Senate, and they do show potential manipulation like this. They look like this. So, Clark County. I can't call them directly. I don't have their phone number. But I think as we push out more data, as we finish our Pennsylvania analysis and put out all 3 pieces of that analysis, and we launch into our lawsuits, I think talking to them would be worth it. And they would be interested in talking at that point, I believe. So, yes, we have. So Esben asked, have we fitted the actual votes distribution to a bell curve? We have. And you'll see here, this actually has those numbers and those values, but there's other values as well for more statistical-like people that talks about how binomial it is or not, and you can kind of gauge how likely something is to occur naturally with that number. We will follow up and push more of that out. I think that's a useful number. There's a kurtosis number and all of that, but for our purposes here, this is just kind of highlighting the issues, and we can get statistical, but we lose people really quick on that. Okay. So anyways, that was just the highlight. Is we're seeing potential Russian tails in early voting election day for Clark County and Washoe County as well. And we were saying what could cause this? Could be vote changing manipulation. Could be changing votes from the president, from Harris to Trump, from the Democrat senator to the Republican senator. And so we did further analysis. That's what this is showing. And we see it kick in after a threshold for early voting. Around, I think we're closer to 200, 215, 230 votes. We begin to see that shift and the votes change over. And so this shows potentially that after a certain amount of votes were cast during early voting, the algorithm, when they fed the votes into the tabulators, that algorithm said, I need Trump to win by a certain amount, or I need to get rid of, or I need to change a certain amount of votes. And so we're seeing the data shifted that way. We're seeing that after 230 or so votes were cast across all of the voting early voting voting machines. All of those numbers, all those votes are then shifted by the tabulators or by whatever, and we begin to see Trump gain votes and the senator gain votes and the Democrats lose votes or not get votes. And so I find this very interesting. And what's funny is if you do the numbers, we assumed it was pure vote changing. Now we're assuming, based on what we can test and what we're seeing, that you're changing a certain amount of votes until Trump hits 60%, and then you're deleting the additional votes to keep him at 60%. So we don't actually know how many votes could have been changed or deleted. We can only see that difference and estimate how many votes were changed. We don't know how many votes were deleted. We don't know the record amount of turnout and the record amount of votes that could have been cast because the algorithm would have just got rid of them. The only way to know how many votes could have been changed and deleted is by looking at the paper, looking at the audits, looking at the actual physical copies. So, questions there? I'll take some time. Let's look back here. How closely does this look like the data from these other places? I'll be honest. Looking at Russia and looking at Georgia, it looks the same. It looks like the same type of manipulation. It looks like the same potential algorithm. It almost looks like they refined it in Russia and then they implemented it elsewhere. And we see it in Georgia as well. This is recent, 24. It's the same freaking shape. It's not like they... It looks very similar, scarily similar. So... yes, and I don't know if we included the... Yep, and so let's talk about 2020. So this is Election Day. Remember how I said Election Day looks more like a bell curve? Well, it looks like a bell curve because the voting data falls within that normal range. But remember we said somewhere around 50% or so, we started to see some weirdness. Here's the thing. 2020 and 24 both look more like a normal distribution. But what's interesting is when we actually look at the correlation of votes, we noticed that in 24 for Election Day and in 2020 for Election Day, excuse me, the amount of votes per voting machine were way lower. They were more spread out. They were more diverse. Excuse me. And so if there was a certain threshold, the tabulators may not have changed the vote distribution here because it wasn't enough votes cast. And so Washoe County is a different story. This is Washoe County. This is Election Day. This is 2020 and 24. And we see potential manipulation in 2020 for Washoe County for Election Day. Different threshold, potentially different algorithm running to change votes. But we see that separation occur after 100 votes. We don't see it very clearly in 24. And so I'm thinking if there was a vote changing or vote deleting algorithm, and it was running in 2020 and 24, they've changed it. They've updated it. And there wasn't enough votes cast in 24 for Election Day to trigger the threshold, or when they went to change the data, it fell underneath the threshold to change the data. And so we don't see it very clearly in Election Day for 24. We do see it in 2020 for Washoe Election Day. And early voting, same concept. We do see it in 2020 for early voting in Clark County. Remember how we read this? This is the votes cast per machine. This is the percentage of candidates. Red is Harris, 2020, red is Biden. Red is Trump. Blue is Biden. I apologize. And so we see that more normal distribution for both up until about 400, 500 votes. And then it begins to separate. And we see Trump exceeding and Biden staying underneath 45, 50% of the votes. That's 2020. So now we look at 24, early voting, Clark County. Same way to read it. Total votes per machine. Percentage of the candidate. Harris is blue. Trump is red. And you'll see it's far more aggressive in 24. Early voting, we see separation begin closer to 300 votes. 230, 300, and then it becomes very clear. And then there's a minimum floor and a maximum floor, and Harris is locked at around 40% at most. So if there was a vote-changing algorithm, and it was in use in 2020, it may not have been aggressive enough to change the outcome of the election. 24, we see the threshold lower. We see it more aggressive, far more aggressive. So aggressive, in fact, that we see it everywhere we look in terms of drop-off vote and everything else. And here's that Senate race I talked about. The early voting looks the same. It's the same thing. So, and then this is early voting for Washoe as well. Both 2020 and 24, we see the same separation. We see the same potential concerns of manipulation occurring then. So this is where we talked about if it was occurring, early voting, can we show it in the voting distribution? This map just shows all the early voting locations in Clark County, Nevada. This is Las Vegas. Las Vegas is ridiculously liberal, ridiculously blue. I think there's over 100,000 more Democrats registered in this area. And yet we're seeing in the places where more votes were cast, the Republicans start to exceed the amount of Democrats there and lead by 8,000, 5,000. So this does not match the demographic of the people there whatsoever. This would further support if there was the manipulation of the tabulators changing votes around. It doesn't match the demographics. They just change the votes around, and we see it and reflected in this data. And so I think someone had asked, where else are we seeing it? Potentially everywhere else there's a noticeable drop-off vote difference. And the reason that would be is because you changed votes from, well, let me make a caveat. Drop-off vote could be an indication of manipulation only if the presidential race was targeted and not the Senate race. Here's a fun fact. Clark County, Nevada, we see almost an equal amount of votes cast for the president to the Senate for the Democrats. Everywhere else, these other swing states, we don't. We see Harris is getting less votes. Trump is getting way more. And so if there was vote manipulation occurring and they were targeting the presidential race, a drop-off vote difference would show that. All it means is like the senator gets, let's say the senator gets 100 votes. The president gets 100 votes. And then the tabulation machine's like, I need 20 more votes for one candidate to win. So the president loses 20 votes. Now they have 80. The senator still has 100 votes. That drop-off number, that's what we're looking at, is how more or less votes they got. And we're seeing it in the swing states. It occurred in the swing states, heavily in the swing states. More normal outside the swing states. But that doesn't mean it didn't occur outside the swing states. It just means that if it did occur, it may be more targeted, or both races could have been targeted as well. You don't know until you go look. That's why we want to do audits. All right, let's look at some questions here. So I see a lot of people talking about Thom Hartmann. I'd love to be involved in that. And I see people are talking about doing an audit. An audit hurts no one. There was audits in the 2020 election. That was the whole point. If there's no compromise, if the tabulators are good, if the paper trail matches the reported election totals, there's no downside to doing an audit. It doesn't hurt anyone. We're going to pay for it. You guys are going to pay for it. And if we find nothing, then we're all reassured that everything was safe and secure and there was a mandate and everything's good. If it's not audited, the risk of manipulation, if it did occur and we don't find it, is huge. But if it didn't occur and we look and we don't find it, it's fine. It's a win-win by doing an audit. There's no downside besides obviously just paying for it and doing the work. But realistically, these need to happen anyways, and it shouldn't be us paying for them, but it is. It shouldn't be us doing them, but it is. So, all right. So, oh yeah, I love when you guys bring up bullet ballots. Let me talk about this real quick. This is another thing I love talking about because I witnessed... Oh, sorry, one moment. I might sneeze. Nope, I'm good. Nope. Okay. All right, so I fully understand the bullet ballot situation. Let me explain what a bullet ballot is, where it comes from, and go from there. Let's actually, give me a second. Let me see if I can find it for you, just because I think that is it's warrant a conversation. So let's go to where it originally occurred, and I will bring it up for you. I think there's a Substack. Okay. I believe this is an appropriate Substack. I'm going to pull it up on the screen. Okay, it might not be. Give me 1 minute. How are we at on time? About 20 minutes or so. Yes, all right. We're going to pull this up. This is a gentleman I think is worth your time looking at. So we're going to hide this. And we're going to do that. There we go. Can you see this? Let me know when you're good. How are we looking, guys? Can you see this? I might be slightly delayed. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize, yeah. Okay, I'm going to assume you can see this here in a minute. Ooh, what does this do? Oh. I see emotes coming through. Okay, cool, we can see this. I also apologize. I want to do these live streams on the Election Truth Alliance YouTube channel. Hopefully, I think we have a date. I'll have to look at when it'll actually let us start doing live streams. But I want to do it on there. We don't have any bells or whistles. Zoom in a bit, you said? Okay, there we go. That's probably way easier. Okay, bullet ballots. If you're not familiar, Steven Spoonamore, a notable cybersecurity expert, he was the one to write a duty to warn letter, after the election day for 24. This gentleman also had highlighted some concerns in 2004 for Ohio, I believe, for potentially a man in the middle / some form of manipulation occurring there, and he highlighted concerns there. And I do believe they found concerns in 2004 in Ohio. And so this gentleman is the creator of what we call bullet ballots. And he has caught a lot of fire for it, but I don't think he's wrong. Let me explain why. So if I can find his bullet ballot here. Let's see if I can find his bullet ballot analysis and highlight exactly what it is. Did he get rid of it? He might have actually gotten rid of it. Oh, I have to log in to see it now? All right. Well, I was going to highlight it, but not a big deal. I'll explain what it is. So what a bullet ballot is a bullet ballot, when he was talking about it, is the amount of votes Trump was getting over the next down ballot candidate, like the senator. Sounds an awful lot like drop-off votes. So we can actually go back here, since I don't need this anymore. Oop, disappeared myself. Here we go. And so, drop-off votes, right? So bullet ballots would have actually matched what we're seeing. What he was saying occurred is a bullet ballot, when he was highlighting it, and he was worried that they were stuffing votes, that they were putting in extra votes for Trump. And that's why he would get, 20,000, or he'd get like 8% more votes than his Senate candidate. And so that was a bullet ballot where there's no other votes on the ticket and it's just for Trump. And so that's what he was highlighting, is he was saying, hey, this looks weird. I think they may be synthetically adding votes. They may be cheating and stuffing ballots. And I agree. Our data agrees, but it's not potentially stuffing ballots. It's changing votes from one candidate at the presidential race to the other. And it looks the same on paper. And so that was what gets me, is the drop-off vote analysis is just a more informed version of the bullet ballot theory. And so he was right. If there was vote manipulation, if the tabulators are compromised and they changed votes around. Okay, I'll have to go back and find it and do a follow-up. I couldn't find it. But his concern was, are the tabulators compromised? And if they are, you could have cheated and done it this way and added votes in. And he wasn't wrong. And so all we're showing now is, instead of it being added in votes, we're concerned that it's changed votes from one candidate to the other. And it's going to look the same on paper. It's going to look the same for drop-off. It's going to be the same thing. So he was right in that regard. And so for him to catch slack and people to be like, oh, bullet ballots was crazy. No, it's just, it was a theory based on the data they had then, and it has evolved into the drop-off vote analysis. So he deserves respect and credit for that. I've actually defended him recently in some emails back and forth with some other knowledgeable people. And I said, hey, why are you attacking him when he is the foundation for what we're doing now? And he deserves the respect. And he was the first one through the door. He was the first one to warn us about these concerns. So don't discredit him just because it wasn't technically right, but it was. So, and here's where we talk about drop-off. All we're showing in these graphs, if you've not seen these, all it means is we look at how many votes the president got versus how many votes another race got. So the Senate, another comparable race. And so in Ohio for 24, the 0 line here, this is per county. Each of these little lines, there's 2 lines per county. Each of them is a county. And the y-axis is the percentage of votes more or less that the president got when looking at the Senate. And so what we see here is this is both candidates. Red is Trump, blue is Harris. And if they're below this 0 line, they got less votes than their Senate candidate. If they're above this 0 line, they got more votes. So it's not that they got more or less votes here. It's how consistent it is across the entire state, across all of these counties. So that's what we're looking at, is we're looking at Harris underperformed across all of Ohio. And not in one county did she get more votes than the Senate candidate. Interesting. And then when we look at Trump, he's overperforming by a significant amount, same issue. And what's noticeable here is if this was caused by a algorithmic vote change, if this is a non-human voting pattern, people don't vote like this. If this happened by a vote change, then the amount of underperformance for Harris is less than the amount of overperformance for Trump. If votes were being taken from Harris and given to Trump, it would match this theory, because his at every place that she's underperforming, he got more votes. Theoretically, some of those votes could be changed from Harris. And how do we know this is a non-human voting pattern? Look at 2016. Look at here. Look at this. This is 2016. This is a comparable race. I believe the reason we didn't do 2020 here is there's not a Senate race to look at. So if you look at this race, look how chaotic this is. Both candidates can underperform or overperform randomly. And it has no actual impact in terms of winning or not. One Senate candidate could be really popular in one county, but both the president and the Senate could win anyways. So this shouldn't have any direct comparison on winning or losing in terms of you could win the state, you could lose the state. You should just see change. You should see a consistency across the state. And in 2016, we see a human voting pattern of chaos. 24, we don't. This isn't the only state we see this in. We see this in Arizona, both for 24 and a little bit for 2020. Not as clean, not as cut for 2020, but there's concerns as well. We see it in Wisconsin, heavily in Wisconsin. There are some places where we see some inverse, and that's good, actually, but it's not as clean. It's not as random as 2016. So there's still concerns for Wisconsin. We've looked at some of the counties, and we have follow-ups as well. Minnesota, just absolutely ridiculous. Same very clear separation, just like Ohio. 2020, absolutely far more random and normal and human. So Minnesota is a huge concern here. Montana is weird. I want to follow up. This might not be 100% accurate. There could be some weirdness, could be some inconsistency. This graph may be wrong. And so we'll want to follow up and we'll want to publish further data for this. But if this is correct and the amount of underperformance here is occurring, some strangeness, some very clear strangeness could be happening here. Texas, a little bit of randomness, but still more consistent over and underperformance as well. So those were just highlighting the concerns. On their own, it doesn't prove or disprove anything. Let me say that. All of this data on its own doesn't hold water. But when you start to take all of it and put it together, it is a good foundation for asking questions and investigating and getting deeper. And the concern is, as we get deeper, what are we going to find? We looked at Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And so the concern is, if there was a vote-changing algorithm on the tabulation machines, and it was causing the drop-off vote because the presidential race votes were getting taken from one candidate given to the other, and that would cause a drop-off from the president to the senator. Well, if we look at other places, do we see the same concerns? And so this is Pennsylvania, this is Philadelphia, this is mail-in, and this is election day, polling place data. And so remember when we talked about Clark County? We didn't have it for Washoe, but Washoe's the same in Clark County, Nevada. Mail-in doesn't really show statistical concerns. It's more normal. No red flags. No strange drop-off either. Both candidates are matching or overperforming. We see the same thing in Philadelphia where the Democrats favor mail-in. and we don't see any strange changes to how they're performing as more votes were as the turnout grows. The way you read this is the bottom is turnout percent of all vote types, and the y-axis, the left axis here, is the amount of votes, the percentage of votes. So 50% is middle, and so each of these dots, there's one dot for Trump, one dot for Harris, and that's the percentage of votes they got on the machines that counted the votes. These are paper ballots for these guys. So if we look at this dot here, we see that the Democrats went at like 5% turnout of all votes cast for mail-in. We see the Democrats got somewhere around 50, 60, 55, 60% here, and the Republicans got the opposite amount, which is around 45, 40%. And so what you'll find is the way you ultimately win is you get more votes at a higher percent. And so we see that from the little amount of votes cast to a lot of amounts of votes cast, the Democrats are staying consistent, the Republicans are staying consistent. And there's a little bit of diversity here. For Election Day, we see some strangeness. This is polling place data. This is all Election Day. We see that there's some rapid change as you approach all of the votes. This on its own, this could be explained away, perhaps, but this is concerning. Why are we seeing a sudden shift as more votes were cast? As you approach a higher turnout, the Republicans start to gain votes, the Democrats start to lose votes. That would, if this was caused, that if a vote changing algorithm running on the tabulators was occurring, it could cause this to occur. This could be one of the causes. Is this the only cause? Maybe not. Maybe there's some other explanation for this. You don't know until you audit it and you actually look. But this is concerning because this would match vote changing because we're seeing a shift as population grows. So let's look at some questions here. Pennsylvania does all of their voting generally on Election Day, which is interesting. Mail-in is, there's really only a few types of ways to vote, and mail-in is, I'll have to look at how much of the vote mail-in is, but I think it's less than 50% of the votes. It's more heavily Election Day in Philadelphia. So, all right, let's look at some questions. Can we compare Philadelphia 24 to 2020? We can. That's a good follow-up. I don't believe we have any graphics for you right now, but we do have that data. I think we can do that follow-up for you. What kind of shape would you see if things progress normally? I would believe it would be something more like what we see at the top here, where no matter how the candidate performs vote share-wise, it should be more of a straight line. And so to see some rapid changes is interesting. Does it mean anything on its own? No, but we do have other concerns with the amount of tabulation issues in Philadelphia and the statement about vote counting computers that someone made. Elon Musk knows his vote counting computers in Philadelphia or in Pennsylvania. So, and those vote counting computers are your tabulators. It's the same thing. So, how do we distinguish this argument from 2020? Good question. I talked about this a little bit before. 2020, if you go back and look, right out of the gate, right after Election Day, before Election Day, President Trump, time and time again, talked about election fraud. Before Election Day, he talked about how mail-in ballots are fraudulent, how illegal immigrants are casting mail-in ballots, how mail-in ballots are 100%, how the Democrats are going to rig and cheat the election. And I find that interesting. So he said that all the way up until Election Day. And then after Election Day, after he lost in 2020, he continued that argument on fraud and rigging and election fraud. And they proceeded to then launch campaigns to do recounts and audits and find election fraud. And they did over 60 lawsuits. And in every lawsuit, it's actually, they did find, when they're doing recounts and elections, they did find votes that weren't counted correctly. They did. And you'll know what's funny is when they went and they looked, the difference here is Trump wanted to find election fraud. This time around, it is a grassroots movement. It is the American people looking at data and doing an analysis. We didn't come out of the gate claiming election fraud. We said, let's understand what is going on and why this election looks weird, and then make assumptions and test those theories. And that's what we've been doing. And our theories have led us to a potential compromise of the tabulation machines. Harris isn't telling us to do this. This isn't a top-down system. This is the people and people with skills far more advanced than mine. That's kind of the point of the ETA is I work with people who have far more knowledge than I do. I'm just the spokesperson. I'm just here. But they're also the ones doing the analysis as well, helping, figure out what's going on. I mean, I work with them and I talk with them and we present this stuff. And so what's funny is when they did their 60-plus audits, recounts, lawsuits in 2020 after Trump claimed the election was rigged, they found in the places they went and looked for election fraud, they found there was miscounts of the votes. There was issues and potential concerns with the machines, with the chain of custody, with all of these things, because our elections are chaotic. Every time they did a recount, they found more votes for the Democrats. They found when they went to Election Day and early voting and did those recounts and found, reran those numbers, Biden got more votes then. And so a lot of their challenges were actually attacking mail-in ballots. And it's always a big focus is you want to throw out or you want to say the mail-in ballots are fraudulent. You want to get rid of them. They're stuffing the mail-in ballots, get rid of them. And so what I find interesting is there was such a large focus on mail-in ballots being fraudulent per Trump in 2020 leading up to this election. And yet when they went and they did their lawsuits and they looked, they didn't find evidence of fraud benefiting Biden. Any of the evidence they found was potentially benefiting Trump. And they didn't talk about it. They didn't highlight it. They covered it up. And then they potentially compromised the Dominion voting machines during those lawsuits. So when you look at it from that perspective, it's very interesting how mail-in ballots doesn't show concerns statistically when we look at it as much. But then when we look at Election Day, early voting in places both in 2020 and 24, we see concerns. I find that interesting. And so if you're not familiar with this, I'll kind of zoom through the last of this here. Well, give me 2 minutes. I'll let you guys ask questions. I'll be right back. 2 minutes. We'll look at this graph for us. Okay, sorry, I am back. Let's look at the questions real quick. Any good questions here? Yes, bomb threats and all of that. Let me see, did I go back? No, all right, so we'll talk about the last thing. We'll wrap up on this presentation here and address any final questions, and I think we're good for now. It's been over an hour. Okay, anything great? Any awesome questions? I'm looking. What is percentage of all vote types? So when we were looking at these graphs, I think, as I said before, these are like the introductory graphs of us doing the analysis. This isn't the most updated and new analysis of Philadelphia and Pennsylvania. So these, we recreated these, we verified them, we did other tests in other counties to make sure these are right. And so what these initial graphs are just highlighting is that vote change, percentage of vote change. So turnout percent of all vote types, that's not technically accurate because this is election day. So it'd be turnout percentage of all election day voting. And then this is vote share for both parties. So this was just, I grabbed these just to highlight the concerns. As I said, these don't mean anything on their own, but if we continue to see these patterns across multiple places and other concerns pop up, that's where we're highlighting. So part 2 and part 3 of the Philadelphia analysis are actually going to highlight this data more formally have show reproduced results with correct labeling and all of that good stuff. So you'll be able to double check all of that. And that's kind of the point of what we're doing here is we want to make all of this public. We want to make these analysis public. We want to make it so that you guys can look at this yourselves and recreate it and make sure that we're right. And yeah, as I said, we can compare 2020, 24. If we have the correct data for 2020, we can do that analysis as well. We always want more baselines. We always want to look at other elections, other races, all of that. Hopefully I answered all those questions. Let's see, anything else? Why didn't Kamala ask for a recount? I don't know. That is an excellent question that's come up many times. I am familiar with her book where she addresses some of the cybersecurity concerns about potential Russian interference in our elections. Back in 2016, that had come out. All kinds of attempts to interfere with our elections, from social media influence to potentially compromising systems. So it does baffle me that someone who would be knowledgeable about the potential compromise and the vulnerabilities didn't double check. Maybe it was because of how taboo election integrity had become the last 4 years. That would make sense. But still, this is kind of a thing where it's a big deal and it's worth double checking. It's worth making sure this is not an actual compromise and our tabulators aren't being manipulated, because if it is, it's the biggest deal. There's nothing bigger than this. This is a threat to our way of life, to our democratic process, to our country, to our people, to our Constitution. And that just, it baffles me that, you know, our federal and state government officials, they take an oath to do their jobs, to protect, and, you know, and it wouldn't have been hard at all to double check this. Like everyone was saying, everyone wanted to occur. So, all right, I'm looking at any other questions. All kinds of excellent questions. Won't be able to jump on all of these. Well, we'll continue on here. Hopefully I addressed the recount question. Yep, as I said, we're pursuing audits. It doesn't just have to be us for audits, but we are doing the audits where we have the data and we feel like we would be able to at least try and argue with that in the court of law. So if you're able to donate, please do so. And then hopefully, as we kick things off, other states will do audits. Like, it wouldn't be anything crazy. Clean sweep of the swing states. So what this portion of the presentation shows, this is just highlighting additional concerns. So we talked about the statistics, we talked about the numbers, the analysis. Data on its own tells us a little bit, but the point is you look at the big picture, you look at everything. And so, might sneeze 1 second. Excuse me, sorry, I'm still recovering from my cold. All right, we'll wrap this up pretty quick here. So these are the additional concerns. This is actually kind of what began our analysis and our journey to get to this point. And so the bomb threats occurring not just in some of the, all over the U.S., the voting equipment compromises, the swing states, and the counties. So if you've not seen this, we'll run through this really quick for you. Then we'll conclude on some final questions, and then we'll go, you know, that'll be our question and answer. I thank you guys so much for swinging by. This has been great. Next time we do one of these, hopefully we won't be super late. So, well, I won't be super late. So clean sweep of the swing states, all 7 swing states. This is very interesting. Last time this happened was 1984, when Ronald Reagan won with 49 out of 50 states. I think Trump won something around 30 states this time. So for him to win all 7 swing states and only 30 out of the 50 states, that's interesting. And so they were all won outside of a margin. Oops, sorry. So the fun thing about our election laws and our audits and our demands is all the states have laws, they vary, but generally in order to do a recount automatically, you have to fall within a certain margin of error for both candidates' vote percentages. So it has to be a close race. What's interesting is all 7 swing states, the vote percentages for Trump winning fell outside of the automatic recount in all of them. That's interesting. That didn't happen in 2020. That may be why this election feels like it happened so quick. Is if you had compromised the tabulation machines, not only in 2020, but in 24, and people voted less by mail this time around and more in person, more early voting, and you win just outside of that recount margin, that's your focus, right? You got to win big. You got to win outside of the recount margin, because if you do cheat and votes were changed and or deleted, a recount would see that if they do a paper ballot recount. And so you can't let a recount occur. So you beat the automatic laws. And that happened this election. All 7 swing states, no recounts. I find that interesting. So, and then people ask, how could you have done this, right? Every state runs its own election. Every state uses different equipment. There's no way you could have cheated everywhere, right? Well, we talked about tabulation machines, not just not just voting machines. Voting machines are very diverse. There's all kinds of options. Tabulation machines, there's only a few main brands that people use, and 70% of the machines used are the 2 top types. And you'll notice both of those brands cover the swing states. You have Nevada, you have, Georgia, South Carolina, Pennsylvania. Over here, Wisconsin and Massachusetts, you have all 7 swing states covered by these machines. I find that very interesting. If you were to compromise both the brands, you could potentially change the outcome of the election. One of these brands is potentially compromised in the last lawsuits, both before in 2022 and potentially earlier. The other has cellular modems in them, which, if you had the capability, theoretically, one of the options for manipulating that brand would be, if you had the capability to connect to them through their cellular modem, you could upload malicious code if you understood the system. So it's not like these tabulation machines are invulnerable. They are just computers. So you'd have to compromise them and understand them, but could you do it? Potentially. Potentially you could. So now, this is what gets a lot of people, is as of our last count, unless new data or we have slightly incorrect data, I'd love for you guys to do this analysis on your own. Let us know if we're wrong. But 88 counties flipped from blue to red in this election, in 24. 0 counties flipped. 88 counties flipped from the Democrats to the Republicans in 24. 0 counties flipped from the Republicans to the Democrats in 24. And both candidates received less than 50% of the vote. And what's interesting is the last time a candidate flipped 0 counties in a presidential race was almost 100 years ago in 1932, when Franklin D. Roosevelt, yes, that Roosevelt, carried 42 out of the 48 states at that time. He won with 57% of the vote. So to flip 88 counties one way, 0 counties the other, and get less than 50% of the vote, that is interesting. That requires a very targeted win in all the swing states and all the places that matter. Even in 1984, when Ronald Reagan won, remember we talked about he won all 7 swing states, and he won 49 out of 50 of the states. Around 30 counties flipped blue then, and Mondale got absolutely stomped. He won one state and still flipped 30 counties. So how could you win 20 states this time around, get almost the same amount of popular vote? I think, what did Harris end up with? Something around 48, 49%, just under Trump, what Trump got overall, popular vote-wise, and still flipped 0 counties. Yes, we have reached out to the media. Yes, we have reached out to everyone who will listen. We will continue to reach out. I've been on multiple live streams. Our data has been sent to people in emails and published, and we're trying to reach out to the media outside of the U.S. because the U.S. media will not talk about this. The U.S. mainstream media will not talk about this. This is taboo for them, whether because they're afraid or because they may not be on the side of the American people. So, but if nothing else would convince you, this is just not okay. This doesn't happen. Not one county? Come on. Now, bomb threats, not as big of a deal, but very concerning. Excuse me. And that's where there was over 200 bomb threats across the country on election day, and it's not that they originated from a Russian email domain or not. It's that the bomb threats they didn't get the level of attention or the level of investigation they deserved. And this is a big concern because this would break the chain of custody for paper ballots. This caused people to have to evacuate the polls. This is a big deal. It didn't really get addressed. And so why would this happen? What would it do? And so very interesting. This happened a lot in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania was all over the place. And that's my concern is if Pennsylvania and the vote counting machine statement go hand in hand, bomb threats would pretty much cause that chaos for you to pull off some additional manipulation there. And it may cover up something happening. So, and then this is the final piece where these numbers were, I need to start putting dates. We need to start putting dates on our documentation and on our graphs themselves, because I did this analysis, I think just after the Pennsylvania counts and everything ended. And so what this shows is remember how we talked about Harris underperforming across the swing states specifically and other states as well, the drop-off votes. And so every time I mention the drop-off votes, every time I mention potential election manipulation, what do people say? People say Harris was an unpopular candidate, that she had a bad platform, that her changing out with Biden so soon was detrimental to her campaign, that she didn't appeal to the normal people, that she was too left or right or whatever, right? I see those excuses. The thing is, the data doesn't lie, right? The data tells us the story. And so what we're finding, this is what's fun, is for Harris to be an unpopular candidate, right? If we ignore everything else that occurred, if we ignore the record levels of registration this election, if we ignore the record levels of financial support the Harris campaign got, if we ignore the record levels of endorsements from popular figures, if we ignore all of that and we just look at the data, right? The data shows when comparing Harris to Biden, she actually got more votes in 24 than Biden did in 2020 in Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Georgia. And we're still seeing drop-off votes in those areas. So she got more votes than he did there. And in the other states, in all 7 states combined, she got 99.6% of the votes that Biden got in 2020. So you're telling me she's performing -1% to -2%, -5% in some of these places, and yet she got the Democratic base to turn up just like 2020. This is a concern. And this is a concern because if she was an unpopular candidate, we would expect to see that she didn't get as much of the Democratic base in these places. But we do see that she did. She got 99.6% of it. And so this further brings up the question of, was she an unpopular candidate, or was this vote changing? Was this a algorithm on our tabulation machines changing votes? And we see that because of the drop-off vote anomalies. So if there was a vote-changing algorithm, this is what I get up for every day, is doing things like this. Look at this. This is awesome. So if there was a vote-changing algorithm, what these graphs show us, here is the pre-corrected drop-off votes for 24. This is all 7 swing states. So you have Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Nevada, Michigan, Georgia, and Arizona. This is the superintendent race, not the Senate race, because they don't have a equatable. I think their governor, their Senate, one of their races wasn't a good race because they were super unpopular. So this is the superintendent. And so, let's see, drop-off. So nonetheless, this is the presidential race, actually, so don't worry about that. And what we're looking at is if 24, Trump wins in all 7 swing states, right? That's what this shows. This shows the counts, the numbers. Blue is Harris. Orange/red is Trump. Orange is red. Orange is Trump. And we see he's winning all 7 swing states, right? All right, you guys see this? So here's where this gets fun. This is pre-corrected. This is the assumed normal votes. If there was a vote-changing algorithm, and it was taking votes based off of the presidential race from Harris to Trump. If the drop-off votes that we're seeing, that we talked about, right, 6% more votes than his senator, we said if those are drop-off votes, what would that actually look like if we inverted them? And so what we did, I'll briefly explain, we looked at the percentage of drop-off across all 6 states that we could really do this in. And so we said if overperformance for Trump was greater than 2%, remember how we said on average he gets around 2% outside of the swing states? In mail-in ballots, we looked and we saw he gets around 1 to 2% overperformance there as well. So if 2% is his standard, and we averaged that out, and he got around 2% more than his Senate candidate, if we take all the extra votes he got over 2%, oh, am I breaking up? You guys hear me? Test. All right, let me know when you're good. I might just be a little loud here. We're almost done. All right. If he got more than 2%, we took that amount of votes and we compared it with what we saw. Okay. All right, I think we're good. All right, we're good. So anyways, I did the numbers. I did the math. I took the amount of votes he got more than 2% across all 6 of these swing states, the amount of votes if there was a vote-changing algorithm, if drop-off votes was stolen votes from Harris and given to Trump. We're looking at 1.5 million votes across 6 swing states that could have potentially been changed. You guys hear that? Let me know when you heard that. 1.5 million votes potentially changed. Okay. If you have audio issues, you may need to restart. My computer's probably cooking itself right now. So I'll let you digest that for a moment. 1.5 million votes. Here's the thing. 1.5 million votes potentially changed because we can see that with drop-off. But it gets worse than that. That's not including mail-in ballots that were never delivered because USPS didn't deliver them. They got lost in the mail. They got thrown away. They got burnt in a ballot box fire, whatever. It's not including disenfranchised voters where they took them off the rolls. They challenged their vote and it got rejected and they had to cure their ballot. That's just potentially changed votes. And here's the concern. When we did this analysis, 1.5 million votes, that was enough to win Harris all 6 of these swing states. All 6. That may be an underestimate. 1.5 million may be an underestimate for potentially changed votes. The reason we say that is because our new analysis now, as we've looked at other places, it's, as we said, the algorithm changes a certain amount of votes to hit a certain margin. We're thinking it's deleting votes as well. And we have no way to know how many votes could have potentially been deleted. If they were deleting votes for multiple races, we don't know. There's only one way to know, and that is to do an audit. Which one would she have lost? Based on this analysis, she would have won all 6 of these swing states. Georgia, we couldn't do an accurate estimate because of the races and not being very equatable. Would she have won Georgia? She may have lost Georgia in this account, but she would have won Wisconsin very thinly. She would have won Pennsylvania very thinly. North Carolina, Nevada, Michigan, and Arizona in a larger amount. That's just changed votes. That's not including everything else, all of the other voter disenfranchisement that potentially occurred. So I'm curious then, our final analysis was, we said this, and it was something like, if everything was counted correctly, if the mail-in ballots that Greg Palast was highlighting, like the 3, I think it's like, I can't even remember the number of mail-in ballots. There's a couple million that he was talking about, potentially never got delivered, got disenfranchised, voters getting purged, something around 3-4 million. If those votes actually were counted, those likely would have also won Harris the election. If this vote changing algorithm did occur, it would have cost her the election as well. And we would have probably seen something closer to 70% of the votes actually being for Harris. I know that's a huge number. That would mean she would be more popular than Obama. But the numbers do estimate something like that. But we won't truly know because we'll never find out how many mail-in ballots weren't brought in. But what we can do is we can get audits. We can contact our local and state election officials, right? Your governors are huge, your secretaries of state, your attorney generals, and we'll put out a template for how you can do it and what you should say and what you should talk about. We need audits. We need audits of the paper ballots. We need audits of the real votes. We don't need machine audits because it doesn't matter if your machine counts correctly today. I need to look at the paper ballots, compare it to the election day results, and make sure they weren't changed by the machines. That's what you have to find out. And then I need you to spread the word, spread our analysis, our concerns, talk to your friends and family. I've slowly started talking about this with people in my like social circles. I didn't in the beginning. I didn't really tell my family anything until I lost my job. And they're like, what happened? I was like, well, I kind of did this. But it's gotten to the point now where my family is invested in this too. They care. It took a while, actually. I'm in a very red area. They weren't, they weren't very pro-Harris, but they weren't very pro-Trump either. But they were more Republican leaning. And it took a while just talking about it and just highlighting the issues. And as I said, this isn't a party. This isn't political. Let me say this. This benefits us all, independent of party. I don't care who you voted for. I don't care who you believe in. I care that your votes were counted correctly. I care that our democracy is legitimate, that we're not getting played by the people who have the power and the wealth and the resources to potentially pull this off, because that's what it's going to take. If you're going to pull this off, you need to be wealthy, rich, powerful, connected. And there's only a handful of people who it would really benefit to have this level of control. The people deserve their answers. We want to make sure, it's not a party thing. It's American people. We are America, as I think AOC said the other day. It's us. And so we deserve answers. We run the country. We pay for everything. The government, there is no such thing as a government without the people. Our taxes pay for everything. And so we are owed a transparent election. We are owed what our Constitution tells us we are owed, which is the right to vote. It is a right. So that's all we want to do. We want to make sure our right, your vote, was counted correctly. So if you want to keep supporting us, go donate, volunteer, spread the word. So thank you guys very much. I think I'll wrap it up there. This has been awesome. I have so much more data that I need to jump back into and get to you. I will have updates on lawsuits. The final thing I'll say is we haven't filed the first of the lawsuits we're doing yet. It's looking closer to 2 to 3 weeks from now of actually filing that lawsuit. That may shift forward and we may do it sooner. It may shift back. But what we're doing with our legal team right now is we are building that foundation, getting all the information, getting everything ready so that we can have the lawsuits and actually have a chance in court. Because if you file a lawsuit that is just absolutely crazy, which last 4 years of election law, election fraud didn't really make this easy, you could lose your license if it's a frivolous lawsuit. So we are making sure all of our bases are covered, that we get one shot at this and we do it right the first time. If you want to keep following us, if you want more updates, follow our YouTube channel, electiontruithalliance.org. Follow my YouTube channel, which is this, Dyer Talks. Follow our Blue Sky at Election Truth on Blue Sky. And then our website at electiontruth.org, electiontruithalliance.org. And as I said, we're going to revamp the homepage of the electiontruithalliance.org so that you get more of like an update. And I believe we're coming out with a newsletter. I don't think we've launched that yet, but we should have a way for you to receive email updates as well. That's going to be huge. So these are all things we're working on. Thank you guys so much. Hopefully this was useful for you. Hopefully I answered a lot of your questions. What we're going to do going forward is, I don't know if we're going to have more weekly ones of these. I'd love to do more weekly ones of these. I think that's fair. And then I'd love to start putting out more videos and data with other people in the organization. So I know we've got Nate, we've got David. These are people who've already been public and they've already kind of expressed their work with us. So I'd love to start having them up here too. So it's not just me. And we get more of an experience of their backgrounds. So thank you guys so much.